A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it is a period of everyone being out for themselves. With this 1996 neo-noir escapade, two women set out to give a big middle finger to the system that says they have to play their parts and choose another path for themselves. There's a lot of money on the line, as well as freedom and the chance to live their own lives. Am I talking about Violet and Corky, or the Wachowski Sisters? Yes. Bound is rated R for sex, violence, and language, and its discussion therein will likewise cover similar topics. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello there, and welcome back to 6 Degrees of Star Wars, the podcast where we explore all the ways George Lucas's flagship franchise surrounds us, binds us, and penetrates us in the landscape of cinema. I'm your host, Sam Marchioni. Joining me today, Grady Smithy.
Hi, I'm the token guy on the panel.
Shamila Karanakran.
If I had a nickel every time the Wachowski sisters cast a white-passing Chinese-Canadian actor as their lead role, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice.
Jasmine Garcia.
It is only because I have slept since watching this movie that I am going to be remotely coherent.
And the person who I think kind of threatened me with violence if I didn't include her on it, Ellie McConaughey.
Does my devotion to this movie make you nervous, Corky?
Oh, God! Thirsty, maybe.
Absolutely
Thirsty,
no one is going to be normal about this movie.
No! How?
It's impossible to be normal about this movie.
Listen. I knew this movie by reputation, and somehow it is still even more than its reputation. And Ellie will tell you, I was unhinged in our chat.
She was. It was just like, yep, that's Bound, baby.
Yes, my dear listeners, we are here to talk about the 1996 movie Bound by the Wachowskis. The credits still dead name them, at least in the version that I watch on Canopy, because Canopy is, I guess, not like Netflix going back in and fixing all of Elliot Page's credits in The Umbrella Academy, but...
Oh, it's on Canopy? I watched it on Pluto.tv instead. Wish I had realized that.
It's in the Boston Public Library's Canopy
Oh, okay.
collection.
Yeah, because I have Canopy too. I will also say it also dead names them in the credits still here too. I mean, I wonder if like their older films are just gonna do that, unfortunately. And it's not like it's an ongoing thing.
So I watched it on a DVD copy that I've had since 2008. So obviously it dead names Lana and Lily. If y'all want to check in with me in the middle of June when the Criterion Collection edition comes out, yes, I already pre-ordered it. I will let you. I feel like they probably will have fixed the credits on that one since it's an official restoration overseen by them.
Hopefully so.
None of what you just said surprised me, but...
This movie.
This is a masterpiece, and it boggles my mind this was their directorial debut. This spoiler alert, the force is with it on my end.
This is a surprisingly normal movie for the Wachowskis, speaking as somebody whose primary interest in the Wachowskis is V for Vendetta and Jupiter Ascending.
Oh, interesting. I mean, V for Vendetta is where our Venn diagrams intersect. I think it was my first Wachowski joint, actually.
Although they only wrote that one, not directed.
You make the project that you know the studio will understand in order to get the clout to do the weird shit you really want to do.
Exactly. But
Well, that's sort of the thing. Like the studio was like, why don't you make Corky a guy? And they basically had to go like, that movie's been made 600 times. Here's something new. Obviously, like I think am I the only person here who'd seen this movie before this episode?
I've seen it.
I have before. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not my experience with this movie. Obviously, like for reasons that became very clear to me when I got older, I was like really into gay movies in high school, and there were like 4 good ones, one of which wasn't in any print for until like very recently. So I really love this movie. The Wachowski sisters are probably my favorite directors of all time. I love the Matrix movies, all 4 of them. I love Cloud Atlas. I will go to bat for Cloud Atlas, and you can't stop me.
So
Speed
good.
Racers, incredible. And yeah, I love. This is like you go on my letterbox right now. Bound's in my top 4.
rightfully so. I couldn't blame you for it. I am gonna hold off on doing that because recency bias is a thing, but no, this is a fantastic movie. And one thing that's interesting, since it's interesting you mentioned how the studios were trying to push back against it being so gay. Weirdly enough, while I was watching this, I had to remind myself this was made in the 90s, because there is just something about it that feels like, for a movie that's clearly trying to invoke the noir genre, which of course is mostly dead, unfortunately, it really does feel very timeless in that way. And this is the kind of representation that even now we're struggling to get. So it was really boggling my mind that this was made in the 90s, which was basically not quite the Stone Age of the gay rights movement, especially in terms of representation, but at the very least, the Middle Ages.
I mean, do you want to hear some of the movies that Canopy recommended to me when I finished watching?
Sure,
Morbid
I'm
curiosity
intrigued.
compels me to say yes.
Body of Evidence starring Madonna.
Ooh, that's a stinker and a half.
Uncut Gems.
That's a great movie. Very stressful.
Something called Vegas in Space.
Huh?
Sure.
Okay, why not?
The Incredibly True Adventure of Two Girls in Love.
That
I've
makes
heard of that
sense.
one, yeah.
Finally,
makes
one
sense.
that
I
I
still
really
need to
get the
watch it.
connection.
There are a lot more, but I'm just gonna do one more. Something called Shit and Champagne.
What?
No, thank you.
No, The Incredibly True Adventures of Two Girls in Love was the fourth movie that I mentioned that, like, by the time I was interested in movies, was just out of print. You could not get it. It came out on Blu-ray pretty recently, actually. It's adorable. It's not like anything. It's not as good as this, obviously, but it's adorable.
It's a very cute teen rom-com.
Yeah. Not everything needs to be this level of quality.
I mean, that's ultimately the end goal of representation, right? You have a glut of good and bad media and yada yada yada.
Ideally.
I'm struck, like, every time I rewatch this film, I have to, like, rewind my brain and go, like, this was pre-Matrix for the Wachowski sisters, because you get, like, they are so self-assured as directors right out of the gate. They're already got that killer instinct to just, like, make every shot that needs to look as impactful as it needs to.
Mm-hmm.
You can see some of, like, the Matrix instances in, like, the shooting scenes, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shami and I were talking about that last night. Like, you could definitely see the seeds of what was to come. And you're absolutely right. Like, every shot in this movie is absolutely gorgeous. I am obsessed with how they use shadow in this movie. It's
Night
like
scenes where you can see stuff.
Yeah.
that too. But also like that one scene where Caesar's like grabbing onto Violet, and his face is almost completely in darkness, except for basically his teeth. He looks like a monster from an old Universal horror movie, and I'm just like, yes, oh my god, it's so cool.
Yeah, while we're talking about the shots, I've got a question. Which shot in this made you go the most feral? And I'll start with mine. It's toward the end where Violet and Corky are talking on the phone to each other when everything has started to spiral, and their hands are against the wall.
Started?
And the camera... Well, okay, I just tried to talk about the shot rather than the context. Skippy over the details there.
Okay, but yeah, I know the scene you're talking about.
Yeah,
That was
it's the two of them with their hands against the wall, inches apart but separated. Holy shit, that's it, that shot. I'm just wondering, what would be the ones that made y'all go feral?
I was feral basically the first 20 minutes of the movie, where it is all basically just a very classy softcore porn, let's be honest here. And I mean that as a compliment.
For me, the scene was that scene where Corky's putting in her lockpick earrings, and it's intercut with Violet putting on her lipstick and mascara. Like, Jennifer Tilly even said that the Wachowskis told her, those are your tools. Those are Violet's tools, and those are Corky's tools. This is how Corky gets by stealing, and this is how Violet gets by painting her face.
That makes so much sense, considering how much they just talk about how, Violet's work is, being tempting to people, specifically men mostly, while Corky's work is, the more hands-on stuff. Oh, that is so cool. But yeah, I will say, like, Grady, that shot you mentioned, yeah, that's, like, easily one of the most romantic things I've ever seen in any movie ever. Like, period.
So I have this like policy when I try to like think of like really great shots. Like obviously people really love the showy, Goodfellas 5 minute long unbroken take kind of stuff. But I always try to find like a shot that isn't that showy, but is so good at like communicating information. And there's this one shot right when Caesar has decided he's gonna confront Johnny. They're on their way, and Violet is like in a chair, kind of like slightly curled inwards, and Caesar is standing behind the bar, and it's like, oh, here's the power dynamic in this scene in one shot.
Yeah.
Though I do also love the zoom out, like the dolly back from the gun on the table. That's so good.
Oh God, yes, so freaking good.
I don't know if I went like properly feral for anything, but this has been the one joke I've wanted to make since watching the movie. The moment Gina Gershon walks into the movie, I turn into small Alison Bechdel, and all I want to do is sing about your swagger and your bearing and the
just right clothes you're wearing, your short hair and your dungarees and your lace-up boots and your keys. Oh, your ring of keys.
She is so magnetic here.
You really do get such very good butch and femme representation in this movie that you still struggle to get in modern Hollywood.
Yeah, Violet and Corky are both gender. I want both their leather jackets. Or Corky's lockpick earrings, and Violet's nail polish. I'm not picky.
There's a certain kind of a certain kind of performance that's extremely hard to do compared to where like you have to get from the moment you see this person why this person is so attractive that this other character is willing to like do whatever they gotta do. And it's so hard to pull off. It's such a risk because if you do that for your movie, if you make that a compelling element of your movie and it doesn't land, like there's your entire to use another lesbian example from this year, Love Lies Bleeding. Katie O'Brien in that movie, like you get like her K-Stu's entire performance is, I need her so bad I'm gonna die.
Yeah, I do just have to say the intimacy on display.
Yep.
That was a good bit. Supposedly they did the one unbroken shot around Violet and Corky because like lower budget studios had a habit of like, we're just gonna shoot some extra porn scenes and like splice them in. Like, you can't do that. Bite me.
Feminist writer and sex educator Susie Bright, she was brought in as a technical consultant for the film and an intimacy coordinator. She not only choreographed those scenes, but she also coordinated the full lesbian bar scene full of what she called real-life San Francisco dykes. And she orchestrated that scene where Corky is dismantling a pipe and water is dripping all over her hands.
There was no symbolism in that shot at all.
Before I watched this, I watched Ever After just because I needed a comfort movie for a little bit. And Ever After is one of those movies with a romantic period hand touch. And I'm like, oh, hand touching's so nice. And then this movie's like, oh, you like that, do you, bitch?
I love that shot early on in the film where Violet's just seduced Corky on the couch, but then Caesar comes home, and then Caesar shakes Violet's hand, and there's kind of like a beat of you realize oh, you know where that hand's been, buddy.
Yeah, there is a heavy emphasis on women's hands in Bound. It's particularly with Corky and Violet. Like, Corky's hands, they're muscular and tattooed, and they're grimy from all the plumbing work. And then Violet has these delicate digits and long painted black nails.
She's not gonna have those for long if she wants to keep up with the lesbian lifestyle.
No, but it's especially explicit in the scene where Violet seduces Corky, and it's still considered a landmark in queer sex scenes in American film. It was also the main reason that Bound was almost barred from a major release. And the film barely exploited an NC-17 rating because the MPAA claimed that the scene was too convincing. And the Wachowskis actually fought this so hard, and they called it out for their homophobia for what it was, and they kept it, and it's legendary.
And deserves to be.
I'm looking at a GIF of the final shot where or the ending shot where Violet and Corky like grab hands inside Corky's new truck. I think Violet has shorter nails now. I think
She
I can't
does.
tell.
I noticed that.
Okay, I can't tell from the GIF. I might have to go back and rewatch it when I get it in 4K.
No, but they're like cut close. She's still wearing the nail polish, but they're cut closer.
That's because she's no longer getting her nails done for the benefit of a guy.
Yep.
Yeah. So I suppose we should actually talk about the actual plot of the film at some point.
We probably should. Even though we are still, even though I am still.
I mean, I think we
screaming.
should knock out the plot like as quickly as possible, because really what this movie seems to be rocking with is vibes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the plot is good, but you are right. Like, the vibes are what make it.
The plot is basic for the most part, and really what elevates it are the vibes and the fact that it's two women in the lead roles.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
I do also think that like it is elevated slightly by the fact that it's a very tightly executed film. It takes place, except for like one bit where Caesar goes off to Johnny's house completely pointlessly. It all takes place in a very, very small geography. All the elements that are important are set up, like everything from the elevator being the where it is to Johnny's cell phone are all like they're set up and then they're paid off. It's just a very tightly constructed film.
I mean, it did have to be. They had a minuscule budget.
Mm-hmm.
God, this might be it.
Yeah, let me see if I can sum up the plot very quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
Two women, a former thief, I guess technically current thief, and a mobster's girlfriend team up to have sex and steal a bunch of money from her mobster boyfriend.
It really is the ultimate be gay, do crime movie.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of The Handmaiden. There's like same film, different font. They're both neo-noirs that focus on the crime where women are particularly dangerous to each other. They have reason to mistrust each other, and they have differences between them in conflicting agendas. They are femme fatales to men, and they could be femme fatales to each other, but they just ultimately decide to work together and run off into the sunset with all the stolen money.
That's interesting that you bring up that comparison, because the book that The Handmaiden is based on was from roughly this time period, but also like the relationship between the two women is a lot more fraught in the book. It has like an entire third act basically got excised from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like the betrayal in the third act of A Handmaiden is real in the book. It's not them fucking around with someone else as it is in the movie.
I love how they take the noir form of starting off with a shot of the at least arguable protagonist in having been betrayed and something horrible has happened and something horrible is about to happen, leaving you to wonder until you get to there, okay, exactly how did they get screwed this thoroughly?
Yeah, because I will admit, because I know, Ellie, you have mentioned this is like Bound and The Handmaiden are like the ultimate double feature, and I have listened to the episode on The Handmaiden. I was half expecting Violet to somehow double cross Corky, but she never does. And it really is Violet's movie for the most part. Like, for a good chunk of it, we hardly ever see Corky. This is Violet trying to survive this toxic relationship. Like, it's hard to get more toxic than your boyfriend's in the fucking mob.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Violet is doing a number on everyone, including, as it turns out, the audience, because you go in, if you're familiar with the forums, thinking that Corky is the protagonist, and no, it's Violet the whole time.
With Jennifer Tilly at her prime, God.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's that one bit right at the end where like Violet has gotten one over on Caesar and gotten in the elevator, and I just absolutely love the shift from her calling Mickey on the phone, like, oh god, he made me help me, and then just like blank face the moment she hangs up, like, okay, next step.
Reminds me of that one scene from Get Out, honestly.
yes, the more terrified Violet looks, the more dangerous she is.
It was also like, so the reason this is a degree 3 is because Kevin Michael Richardson shows up as one of the cops in that one scene, and I don't know if that was so much an A-cab scene as in a cow scene, as in all cops are useless.
Absolutely, all cops are useless.
Yeah.
But the other guy literally steps in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're both just like standing there inches away from like evidence of carnage, and they're like, meh.
Also, How hilarious is it that their shoulder patches say Chicago Police? Because you know that the Chicago PD would not agree to let themselves be portrayed as this dumb and oblivious and useless, you know?
That is true. Yeah, no, it figures that these fictional cops that wouldn't make my A cab, but especially these cab lists, are just absolutely, they're only there to raise the tension because, yeah, they do nothing.
What they are is they're that role that's the ensemble's double cast in the play so that they can get their money's worth of being on stage and they're not sitting back in the dressing room.
Yeah, that there are several moments where basically like Caesar doesn't have the money, but he doesn't know where it is yet, where they basically have to drag someone in from the outside to nearly discover him and force his hand into making a bad decision. One of the things that I really like about this movie is like characters. I feel like a flaw that people have in like analyzing movies is they always want their characters to act very logically, and multiple characters, basically every single character in this movie acts like an idiot at one point or another because like, you know, Violet calls Corky because she's like completely freaked out by this evening and she needs like reassurance that Corky's still there. Corky kind of gets like, you know, kind of gets her ire up and goes to try to rescue Violet without thinking it through. And Caesar is just like completely off his nut the entire second half of the movie.
I do want to give that actor props. Like, he is such a good, funny, but also really threatening antagonist, and that is a hard line to keep up. But he is so, like, considering the fact that I am here for the ladies being gay and doing crime, I really did enjoy his performance. I was never upset when he was on screen instead.
Yeah, Pantaleano is amazing in this.
He actually said that this was his favorite role.
I'd like to take this second to offer my apologies to Joe Pantoliano, because the entire time I was watching this movie, I could not fully engage with him, because I kept thinking, why the fuck do you look like Peter McNichol?
Oh!
You're never going to be able to unsee it now.
In this house, we do love and support Joey Pants. He's very good in this. I think the Wachowskis agreed because they did bring him. Obviously, they brought him back as Cypher in The Matrix. They got a guy who looked exactly like him to play like real world Agent Smith in Revolution. We're gonna ignore that. We're not here for Ellie's Matrix hot takes. You know, he does this like he does this thing that I like that I think a lot of villains do. That I think like lazy writing kind of often necessitates that your villain be like just good at everything. They're really smart, they're really fast, they're really strong, they're really capable. They're all just to make sure that the hero was always on the back foot. I like Caesar because he has a very, very clear set of strengths and weaknesses. He is physically stronger than either of them. He is less moral than them. But he's erratic. He can get emotional. He is not good at lying on his feet. So that makes it, an actual interplay. You know, how are they going to get the upper hand?
Yeah.
And of course, he's not that much less moral than them. Given the single best line in the movie, Caesar, you don't know shit.
Yep.
That was so satisfying.
If you didn't notice it in this time around, the next time you watch it, pay close attention to his clothes, because the more in control he feels, the better his clothes fit him. Every time you see his suit being a little too big or a little too wrinkled or everything, you know that he's crumbling. And then he'll manage to get to a position where he feels safe and secure, and he looks like he's on the cover of GQ.
He takes the time to change after he knows where the money is and he has Violet back at gunpoint, which, you know, is probably what actually really got him killed more than anything.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, like during the foot chase with Violet where he's running, he kind of like loses his cool and his jacket, and by the end he's just wearing his shirt.
Right.
Oh my god, the moment when she gets down to the elevator and then he realizes he has to go up the stairs. I felt that in my core.
It would have straightforwardly been faster for him to just wait for the elevator to come back down. Although if I was her, I would like get back on the other and smack all the buttons.
No, but the clothing thing, it isn't just an in-character bit. This is entirely the costume department. Because in the scene where Gino and Johnny show up, at the beginning, it's ill-fitting. But as soon as Gino has made Caesar and Johnny sit down and he thinks make peace, Caesar's suit is flawless at that moment.
That's a good costume designer. Speaking of the greatest
They
character
got
in the movie,
best
Gino.
out of that crew.
Capiche? What do we think of Gino? I want Gino hot takes right now. Give them to me.
Is Gino the father or the son?
The father.
He's the father.
Johnny's the son.
The son is fucking Elliot Stabler, and that blows my fucking mind. But
Don't it though?
Gino, he's so clearly meant to be there as like a plot device. He's mostly there to amp up Caesar as actual danger, because plugging him was the fucking worst thing Caesar could do, but it was also kind of the only thing Caesar could do.
Yep.
And also, when you think about it, like, he is the exact kind of character that you would expect to be the final boss in all of this. So you know shit is serious when he actually does in fact die, but oh, we still have movie left.
Uh-huh.
Oh, so like, I actually think that's really interesting, because he is such the quintessential patriarch of this kind of institution, for want of a better term. But then he just dies like halfway through the movie, so all bets are off.
I just think the fact that he like there's a brief moment where Violet says like he doesn't speak English very well, or at least he pretends not to. I'm like, oh, so you're not the only one who's just like bullshitting about who you are for tactical advantage.
Game recognizes game.
Yeah, and you kind of have to in that kind of situation, I feel like.
Yeah.
I can't officially speak for any of this because, as far as I know, my family isn't connected to any organized crime, but as our, I think, token Italian ? Lying is at least like 30% of just being in the mob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the police ask you, did you kill this guy, you can't just say, yeah, it was fun.
Oh wait, I did have a bit because, well, not only is Caesar's downfall related to like the screw up he did, but the fact that Violet describes her relationship with him as work.
Yep.
It's like he was banking on her having feelings for him to escape getting shot. And then when she says you don't know shit and she actually kills him. Ugh.
And, he's been calling her my Violet the entire time. His Violet never really existed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was just the part she was playing.
Because when you think about it, we see that from the very beginning when he almost catches her and Corky together. But the minute he sees that Corky's a woman, he just
dismisses her as a rival.
Yeah, It's just like, oh, buddy. Buddy.
My Violet's not gay.
That's why you don't know nothing.
So I actually really like that scene a lot because there's an element where Caesar's inability to recognize his situation is making everything worse for all three of them. But also, like, it up until he breaks out the shears to torture them, there's kind of this like, there's a bit where Violet is sitting on the bed because she thinks she's actually in control of the situation. And then when Caesar comes back with the shears, she's gotten on the floor to try to like help untie Corky. Because turns out it doesn't matter how like calm and collected you are. The guy who has the access to violence actually has the power in the scene. Sorry, Violet.
Yeah, nope, doesn't matter that I'm the sexiest bitch alive. I need to do something more.
But he also like keeps going on about how like Corky did something to Violet, and it's just like, nah, dude, he just fucked her. She just fucked her. Like, she just really good at that.
I mean, to some men, being able to give women an orgasm is in fact witchcraft.
Get up, skill issue.
Oh, Violet's response to Caesar saying, "What did you do to her? Everything you couldn't." That was just a killer line.
So great.
Corky actually knows where the clitoris is.
Also, like, Caesar's death scene where he's falling into that white paint, it's actually kind of very fitting. Like, Addie already brought this up in the Polite Society episode, but in East and South Asian cultures, white is dirge, white is death, and seeing Caesar literally painted in white as he falls is something almost visceral about it. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but it is a great bonus for non-Western audiences.
Yeah, and from the literary English major nonsense thing, the subtext there, they're literally killing him to whitewash their own actions.
Oh.
And from the film major perspective, it's also just like putting white paint around him makes sense from a plot perspective. It makes sense that Corky would hide the money there so that if you walk in, you don't just instantly see it. Also, it is a very striking visual, him getting hit by the bullets and the bullet like splattering out onto the white paint. Like that's just like, again, like the Wachowski sisters, if I had to boil their aesthetic down to a single shot, it would be like, okay, what is the mechanics of this scene? Well, the agent has been shooting at Neo, lost track of the situation, Trinity ambushes him. But the way they do that with that shot, with the shot down the gun barrel that Trinity holding it, dodge this, God, it's just so, it hits so much harder than doing it like any other way would. And that's what I think
Iconic.
they're good at. They're good at recognizing how can I make this moment the most impactful.
It's interesting because back when I was first starting my YouTube channel, I tried doing this thing for a little while called Lady of the Month, where I would like spotlight fictional and factual women. And for a Pride Month episode, I did talk about the Wachowskis. And I liked to say that I think even before they came out, Wachowski protagonists followed a very trans heavy version of the hero's journey that, well, in retrospect, it kind of sounds like when Kyle broke down how the Paul Verhoeven protagonist has his journey, but I think Bound might be an outlier in that sense, because these are two characters who know how shitty the system is. They're already awake to it. They already know that, well, in Violet's case, she already knows that she's lying about who she really is in order to survive. And so, like, we've skipped that first part of the journey, and it's just seeing Corky that Violet's like, this is my way out. And so the Wachowskis, I guess, on this first movie skipped the first couple of steps, so that's part of why their eggs took a little longer to crack. Did that track? Did I logic?
You did logic very well. The connections of the Wachowskis work, and the Matrix in particular, to transness are well established. But I do think that there is this risk that people take of getting hung up on specific details. Oh, well, it's trans because, Trinity says most guys think I'm a guy, or because, the red pill is analogous to estrogen. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But I think that you're right to engage with it more as a thematic change, to understanding that your lack of power in this system and to work to change that.
Once again, it's finding yourself a gay lover who's willing to do anything for you, and getting all that money is the solution. Sure, why not?
I mean, their other major theme is love above all else. Like, they are patently sincere about that. Neo gets saved from death by true love's kiss.
Sure
It's not
does.
even a slight exaggeration.
Nope, I remember. It was great. So they are really big on the, maybe not even quite insta love, but very quick love.
I mean, that's just like a stereotype of queer women, isn't it?
It's also a staple of noir.
It's a very extreme version of U-hauling.
It's also just like a staple. There's a romance in it, but this is not a romance movie, so they don't have time to focus on the entire buildup of the relationship. You kind of just have to use shorthand.
And I buy it. Like, I'll admit, I am very picky when it comes to my romances in movies, but in spite of the fact that, yeah, they don't actually spend a whole lot of time together in this, I 100% buy that they would do anything for each other, if only partially because they're in such a strenuous situation they need to get out of here, so they might as well do it together. But again, like that scene with their pressing their hands against the wall, the fact that they go through such a traumatic moment together, and also even before that, just the sheer amount of chemistry they have with each other and how well they work together both sexually and otherwise. It's like, yeah, I buy that you two belong together.
This is probably going to be the thing that creates the biggest sticking point for me. I'm not 100% behind their chemistry. They are both objectively talented, attractive women, and they're making this dialogue work. But there's this wall of some kind that's making it a little hard for me to get behind Jennifer Tilly specifically. And I think that's a deliberate thing. I think like the artificiality and the performativity of how she operates in this movie are very deliberate, very much in keeping with how Violet is as a character, but that also kind of detracts from the moments of real vulnerability and intimacy, because the problem is when you have a character that's constantly saying things to the effect of I'm lying to you, it makes it harder for me to trust them.
I am a big proponent of Violet and Corky as like incredibly romantic. To be clear, this is yet another one of the moments where like you can 100% dismiss me and I won't be hurt because my brain is fried. Like one of my favorite lesbian romances is Utna and Anthe. If you've seen that fucking show, that one goes places. But I think that there is like this kind of distance that Violet has, and I do think that there is a real sense that like Violet finally breaks down and basically tells Corky that she loves her, not only after an incredibly stressful situation, but when she's not in the room with Corky. I think that's really important to Violet's character. But the fact that that Corky's not only there, Corky didn't abandon her, Corky basically says it back, and that they are, if not physically present, emotionally present with each other by that, as represented by that shot over the wall. Uh, that is what makes the romance work for me. The directors and the writers and the actor all know this is how the relationship works and this is how we have to portray it. I did also just want to highlight, since we were talking about their like chemistry. I really like that shot in the elevator when the like right at the beginning of the movie, where like Violet's looking at Corky like, oh, I need to risk everything for that, and Corky's like, oh, I'm interested. And then they do an overhead shot, which shows that Caesar is like looking away from both of them, like completely dismissing both of them. I
Great shot.
Chef's kiss.
Cinema.
Yep.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like, if it wasn't for that one scene where she finally opens up and is somewhat vulnerable when she did not have to, and in fact, it was a detriment to the plan that she did, I think that's what really helped sell it for me, especially since it had been so long since they had actually interacted at this point in the movie.
Seeing her have her first genuine moment is really powerful there.
God, this is such a good movie.
So good.
It is a good moment. I don't know, a part of me kind of wish that I didn't have to wait quite so long for it. I don't know how to say, because I stayed out of the group chat because everyone was like, oh, I'm wondering what Sam's gonna think about this. I'm like, the more you people hype this up, the more worried I'm gonna be if I don't like this movie. But I did briefly catch what Shami said about me doing the Jessica Rabbit femme fatale thing, and I don't really think that what Jennifer Tilly's doing is Jessica Rabbit as much as it is Marilyn Monroe, partially because I do know that the Wachowskis were specifically referencing Billy Wilder in some instances.
That makes so much sense, especially with the breathy voice. I mean, I know that's just kind of Jennifer Tilly's thing, but oh, that makes so much sense.
And also just the fashion aesthetic, that is very Marilyn, especially with the little sweetheart necklines. And Marilyn Monroe's also a really good example of a femme fatale, because the thing about femme fatale is that we have a dichotomy of villain and victim based on how a woman applies her sexuality. Like, it's very easy to see this movie as Corky and Violet being two sides of the coin. Corky is the villain femme fatale because she transgresses gender norms by being butch as fuck and a criminal, and Violet is the victim femme fatale because she conforms to this image of docile femininity, but that woundedness also makes her, in the end, far more dangerous. And I'm all about that. That's incredibly cool, but again, I think it comes down to Tilly's performance, and I don't think it's a bad performance. I think she's giving a performance that's very in keeping with the character. I just think maybe it's a little too much for me.
That's 100% fair.
I have a performance I can draw a parallel here. I was getting very strong vibes from Kathleen Turner's femme fatale from Body Heat in Violet, which I won't go into details there in case anybody hasn't seen it and wants to. It is an extremely horny noir, and the way that Body Heat ends up, I was expecting that Violet was going to ultimately betray Corky. So seeing that not happen was one of the reasons I like this movie so damn much. She's beautiful. She's in a situation she doesn't like. She's figured out a way to get out of it, and the person that she's going to use as her tool for doing so. But in the end, she doesn't discard the person that she's chosen as her partner. She takes them as her partner, which such a great twist.
The usual critique that you apply to femme fatales or victims, those are the usual two woman dichotomy in a noir, a classical noir. You're either a victim or you're a femme fatale. And I am boiling a lot of theory down very, very far. I'm sure that I'm missing a bunch of stuff. Don't get on my ass, commenters. But the usual dichotomy is if you want your character to be understandable to the audience, not necessarily likable, but relatable, sympathetic, understandable, they have to have communicated wants and they have to act upon them. And the usual dichotomy between victims and femme fatales in the reason why they're considered objects by the plot, the reason why a lot of feminists critique attacks noir for this, is if you're a victim woman, you want, but you do not act on it. And the femme fatale acts all the time, but their wants, their goals are unknown to us. And so like the interesting thing to me about Violet and Corky, and you hit the nail on the head, Sam, they are both elements of existing noir femme fatale stereotypes, especially Violet, is that throughout the movie, we know their wants and we know what actions they're taking to do it. These are femme fatale stereotypes who have been transformed into subjects of the camera rather than objects, if that makes sense.
Absolutely tracks. I think it's a mistake to believe that the femme fatale is confined solely to the noir genre, because like the class that I took that started giving me these ideas about femme fatales, that class included stuff like Medea as a femme fatale, or we read Dostoevsky's, I think it was The Idiot, I don't remember. It's a complicated Russian novel. Everyone's got 9 different names. And I can't remember all of them, but it was definitely a Dostoevsky. And we read Elena Ferrante books and Venus in Fur. So femme fatale, I think, is a much bigger label than people give it credit for, because the noir genre limits it. And so I think it's important to recognize that this is a neo-noir where we have 2 femme fatales, because neither one checks all the stereotypical boxes.
And then they have a good for her narrative, really, and it's awesome.
It is interesting. Like, one of the things that I find very interesting about neo-noirs, which is basically all noirs made after a certain point, is like, they can be set basically any time, but they rarely look or feel contemporary. You know, this one might be set in the 90s. They do have a cell phone, but visually, aesthetically, it feels like it's set in like the 60s. Trying to confine the femme fatale purely to noir is kind of like, you're right, very, very limiting. But it's also like, it became most famous and most recognized through that genre. So I think that it is worth considering through that lens, through the lens of the original noir, and how modern neo-noirs or how other variations on the femme fatale and other genres sort of alter the cliche to adapt it to its new setting, to its new genre, to whatever. I apologize for getting this deep in the weeds on like my theory shit and my pretentious shit. It's just a movie that I've loved for decades at this point.
Ellie,
I think
why would
really
you
good thoughts.
apologize? That was some good shit.
Honestly, this is a really interesting thing to be following up American Graffiti with specifically, because on one hand, we just went through a movie that was like trying to replicate an era very specifically, and now we're talking about something that is also kind of trying to replicate an era to an extent, because you see those various touches that do make this movie specifically feel like even more of a noir film than other neo-noir films. Like, God, I don't...
No, that's
Blade Runner, I guess you could call neo-noir, but it doesn't have the same closeness of aesthetic, and I think that has partially to do with Art from Adversity and having only a $6 million budget and such limited resources.
Yeah, and It is really interesting how you bring up American Graffiti, because that portrays its era so specifically, and that makes it look dated. And this doesn't try to make itself be a specific era, and that makes it timeless.
The most dated thing, everybody has landlines.
That is fair. That's like the
You couldn't make this
one
movie today,
dated
because
part
today
of it,
everybody has cell phones, and that would fuck the plot up.
No, a cell phone's really
No, you
important
could
to the
make
plot.
this movie today. It would just be crypto.
I know, yeah, it's just you would have to find a way to have people not all have their cell phones, because instant messaging and just being able to call somebody while they're on the highway, they would know a lot sooner that no, Gino and Johnny
Mickey
aren't in a wreck.
Gino.
There's no Google alerts about that shit.
Damn, that's true. But, and yet, you're right. It does still feel so timeless all the same. And I can't quite put my finger on it other than, yeah, you've got the noir aesthetics, but still very, well, I wouldn't say very modern sensibilities, but like there's just something about it that feels timeless. Like I said, I had to remind myself this was a 90s movie.
I think part of it is like the dichotomies between like with Violet and Corky. Like, side note, I do love the height difference between them, because something about a tall femme and a short butch just tickles me and flips the usual stereotypes on the head. And it's the same thing with their tattoos. Like, Corky has a labrys, like a double-headed axe on her upper arm, and that represents lesbianism and feminine strength. Meanwhile, Violet has a tattoo of a violet, which is yet another iconic lesbian symbol, but it's located in a very secret, intimate place. It implies that Violet spent a lot of time with a female tattoo artist in order to get it done, and it adds a whole other layer to that final scene where Corky asks about the difference between her and Violet, and neither of them know.
I mean, I do question how long that tattoo actually took, because it's a very small tattoo.
But it's also located in a very, like, sensitive place, so that could affect it.
I also think she's exaggerating how long it took to, like, get Corky's hand on her boob.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And it was so good. It was so good.
Time period thing's interesting to me because, like, this is one of those threads that I, like, don't tug on super hard. But there's this, like, subgenre, I don't want to call it subgenre, there's this, like, technique that people do with media sometimes. I think my favorite example is Life is Strange, where it is set in the time period it is, you know, it was made in. Like, it is set in, Life is Strange is set in the modern day. Cell phones are an important part of it. But aesthetically, it is set in the 90s. That is what it's drawing on. And I do find it extremely interesting. Camila, you mentioned the final scene, that up until that point, Corky's truck is a beat up 63 truck, you know, a truck from a time period of sexism and control. And then at the very end, when she's free, when she and Violet are like free to go live their own lives, she has a modern truck from a time period she can be herself.
One thing I love about the truck, the 3 letters on the license plate are CLN. It's literally a clean getaway.
Nice.
Oh,
Hey!
Yes, and you know, when I was watching it, I was like, wait a minute, pause, run back. Holy shit, they did go there.
I do love that during the getaway scene, they're playing Tom Jones's "She's a Lady" over it.
It's so good. As soon as I heard it, I was like, "Oh nope, that was perfect."
They
that
actually wanted girls from Emphysema from Girls from Emphysema. I cannot pronounce that name, but they couldn't get the rights for it, so that's why they ended up with Tom Jones.
Well, they blew most of their song budget in the beginning of the movie, and then they're like, oh damn, we need one needle drop for the credits.
Yep. I have one complaint about this movie that I would like to register, since we're talking about the music. You make a movie about lesbians in the 90s and there's no Indigo Girls?
That's valid. Although I don't know if Indigo Girls really fits either of their vibes. Because you're right.
They're driving off so that they can become the Indigo Girls.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the music, again, we were talking about how it was aesthetically set in the 60s. I don't think Indigo Girls would really fit on the soundtrack. What were some other famous gay bands from that
I
era?
know, it's just the joke was there.
That's fair. No, I'm just trying to think, I do think it would be kind of fun if they had a more modern song playing, you know, tie into what I just said about the modern truck, but I don't know, would the ending be improved if they played, some garbage over the end credits instead?
Maybe not over the end credits, but garbage would have absolutely fit in somewhere here.
In the bar scene, maybe.
I mean, you can always find garbage.
Yeah, but like we said, limited budget.
And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing about this movie, not really.
Yeah, the Wachowskis are well known for knowing writers who use subtext and thinking they're all cowards, hence the clean getaway car. I wouldn't change a thing about them. I think they're brilliant.
The bursting out of the closet scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon, they did an Entertainment Weekly article where they talked about their experience feeling bound, and Gina was saying how the closet door scene, the act of kicking it down, it was so symbolic, and the idea of coming out of the closet, and many girls had actually came up to her and said that it helped them come out and helped them change their lives, and she found that specific incident very meaningful.
Considering how many queer characters Gina Gershon has played, that makes so much sense, and I absolutely love that. And yeah, happy Pride Month, sexiest movie ever, 10 out of 10.
A lot of my other comments, even the more like intelligent ones, I don't think are stuff you want me saying on this podcast.
Yeah, we could probably just sum it up with not to be a sapphic, but oh my god.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is an incredibly sexy movie, just like across the board.
R.I.P. Joe March, you would have loved this movie.
I've got one last comment because this was a moment that I found too hilarious to let go unremarked in this. I love how at the end when they're sparring back and forth about, are we going to split the money? Is he just going to grab the money and then shoot them and everything? Caesar looks at Violet, says, I'm going to make you suffer, and then kisses her.
It's a little on the nose.
Yeah.
It is so on the nose, it has gone all the way up the nose.
That actually connects back to like way at the beginning of the movie, a conversation that I wasn't there for, where basically it kind of felt like Corky was trying to screen Violet and be like a gold star lesbian. I hate that I don't have a better term for that, but
well, that was the term
the
that was
vibe it
used at
gave
the
me.
time.
Yeah.
And they moved past it at least.
I'm not saying Corky's a turf. Corky would absolutely fuck you, Ellie.
Well, she has a wife, but no, I do. There is an element where that could be like a little uncomfortable, but I think that is very clearly, she mentions later on when they're planning the heist that she got betrayed by one of her partners. That's how she wound up in jail. And the way she talks about it, this was not like, oh, just a work partner. So I think that there is that element of insecurity there, that she's worried that Violet is going to pass her over when she stops being convenient. Like, if I started sleeping with someone while I was working next door to their house while her boyfriend is out, like, I would be worried that I'm only there because I'm convenient too. Like, that's a very real insecurity. And I think that it's handled, I don't know if it's handled super gracefully, but I don't think it's an endorsement of the film itself to like shame someone for sleeping with more than one gender.
Yeah, because like it's number one, it was the 90s. Number two, they did end up moving forward from it. Like it was such a small scene that they ended up working away from, that I am not going to hold it against it. And also, there are people who have kind of dealt with being kind of somebody's quote unquote experiment, and I realize there's implications of that are unfortunate, but it can be hurtful feeling like you are being passed over just because it's no longer convenient to be with you.
Renee Rapp has a really good song about that right now, and I do think that like the emotion of like, I know that I'm just being used for sex, just to be like, oh, I want to experiment, but also like not being strong enough to say no to that. It's very damaging. And I think that it's worth having Corky have that moment. Again, especially since they do move forward from it.
In conclusion, we should not let the TERFs ruin this for us.
No. Exactly.
And it's being reclaimed.
The TERFs don't want this movie. It's directed by trans women.
Precisely.
I did mention in the Handmaiden episode that I can usually tell, based on the way it's shot, whether or not a lesbian sex scene was directed by a man or a woman. The one place when I was in high school that dichotomy broke down was this movie. Turns out I was right.
Your gaydar was spot on even then.
I mean, again, let's shout out Susie, because Susie definitely also helps with that.
Oh, and she actually appears as an extra in the movie. Like, she was the girl that Corky was talking to in the bar scene.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
Oh, fun.
Mm-hmm.
I like when stuff like that happens.
Can we say that one cop that stopped her was an example of ACAB?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Most excellent.
Remember, kids, no cops at Pride.
Well, yeah, she does say, hey, would you like to leave or would you like me to have you arrested on bullshit?
Yup.
Ugh.
Mm-hmm. She does flash the badge to get Corky off her. I don't know what their relationship is, but I do love Corky saying in front of her, like, hey, when you're bored with her.
Queen shit.
Corky is a unit of hotness. Most people can barely ever reach more than 0.85 Corkies.
No, but the fact that Gina Gershon, she left her agent over this because they didn't want her to do it. They literally told her, you are going to ruin your career doing this movie. And Gina said, no. I never get to play the hero and to get the chick. And she was trying to embody so much of Marlon Brando, Monty Clift, Robert Mitchum. With that sort of masculinity in her performance, it is just raw and visceral to see.
I mean,
Kicking my feet, twirling my hair over these ladies.
I mean, this would therefore be the same agent, like, no, don't do Bound. You should do more stuff like your previous movie. Showgirls.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. She was
Lord.
coming right off of that. She was so ultra feminine that, so she cut her nails and her hair, and she started boxing.
Get you a woman who can do both. I believe the time has come to ask, is the Force with it?
Absolutely.
Always.
Unquestioningly. Absolutely, 100%.
The Force is with it in a way that would make the Jedi Council blush.
Now suddenly I'm picturing a situation where Gina Gershon is Anakin Skywalker
Oh my
and Jennifer
God!
Tilly is Padme Amidala.
Oh my god!
I'm not even remotely sorry.
I'm not against it. I'm all for it. Someone write this at you.
Question things about myself this movie makes me...
I will make it unanimous and have the Siths deal in absolutes. This movie has not, changed my life completely, but fuck it. Force is with it. Who has pluggables?
Uncharacteristically, instead of going with a, if you like this, then try this, just, if you haven't watched Bound, or if it's been a while, watch Bound. Seriously. I can be found as SnakeBitCat on most major socials.
You can find me on the online news on Tumblr, where I post listicles and do fan cat requests. So any sort of Bound related stuff, you can come to me for that. And my GoFundMe is still up, so donations are greatly appreciated.
I can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at LSR42. I can be found on Tumblr at Football in Tuxedos with dashes between all the words. My Medium page is also LSR42. I recently wrote a thing on a movie there. Not a movie I think anyone's expecting me to write on, but we'll see. I also have a podcast of my own, which I guess is now a sister podcast to this, since we're all bouncing off each other. Anyway, the biggest night in podcasting. And if you like this movie, please do check out Love Lies Bleeding. It's very much playing in the same pool, and I loved it a lot.
Finally, I am also actually going to do a recommendation. If you like to see lesbians going through it in genre fiction, you should find the comic book I Hate This Place. Basically, these two lesbians inherit a farm that turns out is dealing with basically every kind of horror movie trope you could think of. And of course, you can always find me on Twitter, Tumblr, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Faye Riviera. And you can follow. And I am also the host of another sibling podcast, In Each Retelling, the podcast we explore all the ways old tales are made new. It is Pride Month. We've got a lot of fun stuff lined up. And we're still doing our Dracula Weekly segments as well. So feel free to follow us, and also follow us on Twitter at IER Podcast.
As for me, I will ask that you keep the spirit of Star Wars alive by supporting artists through the Entertainment Community Fund, and by taking action to support anti-imperial and anti-colonial movements across the globe, partially by using links provided below, and by taking action in your community. And you can find me on the wider internet as La Femme Fictionale, including on YouTube, Twitter, and Tumblr, where you can also find the blog for this show. Our theme music is provided by Refractory Period, the two girls' one-beat synth-pop sensation. You can follow them on Instagram at Refractory Period the band. To further support this podcast, please subscribe to us on your platform of choice, leave reviews, consider joining Patreon, and share with your friends to boost our visibility. To further support this podcast, please subscribe to us on your platform of choice, leave reviews, and share with your friends to boost our visibility. And consider joining Patreon, where you can get early access to our bi-weekly recaps of The Acolyte as it airs. And now it's time to turn to the Chance Cube to decide where our journey takes us next.
Three,
That is a 3.
Another 3. All right. Next is The Color Purple from 2023.
Nice.
We will see you all then. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, stay beautiful, and may the force be with you.